everyone, it's Leanne. Welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. Today I'm making a Mother's Day card and a grandmother's Mother's Day card as well. I'm using the really sweet stamp set from Lawn Fawn for this occasion. And so I'm going to show you how I create this card. So I'm using this cardstock I bought at Michael's. It's called Roses and it comes with these 5 different colors. I kind of like these 2 pinks here, so I'm going to use one of those. And then this is the Mum and Me stamp set from Lawn Fawn. And then I have the scalloped rectangle borders to use. And I have a sheet of Neenah Solar White cardstock and some Versamark ink because I'm going to do some embossing. So I have gold embossing powder for that. And I'm going to use my FABER-CASTELL pencil crayons or colored pencils. I haven't used these in a while and I really love them. So I do have a bunch that I've bought, some open stock ones as well as this kit. So I'm going to use those to color my critters with. So let's get started. So to start, I'm going to cut my card base. So this is a thin cardstock. It's a lightweight cardstock, but it's enough to make a card. So I'm going to use that as my base as well as the background for the front of my card. So I think I'm going to pick one of those 2 pinks. I'm just going to check them out and see which ones I like the best. And I really like this blush pink here. So I'm going to create my cards using that piece of cardstock. And so I'm going to trim this down to fit an A2 size card, 5.5 by 4.25, I believe that is. And so just measuring it out with my ruler, and then I will cut this down and create 2 cards, 2 card bases for this. So once I have these measured out, I'm going to come in and just tuck my my cutting mat underneath and using my metal cork back ruler. I'll cut these with my X-Acto knife so I get a nice straight edge. And then I'm going to cheat. The one sheet's a little bit longer than the other, so I'm going to use the first one I cut as a guide. Just draw a line where it overhangs and then quickly trim off that edge that's a little bit higher than the other cards so that they match. So now I'm going to score these on my Martha Stewart paper folder. And so it comes with a little bone folder scorer tool. So I just put that into the correct measurement, and at the halfway mark, just make that score line and then fold those cardstock bases down. So now I have my cardstock. I love that machine, by the way, or that tool. It's really handy. So now I'm going to do the rectangle border. I'm going to use this to cut out my Neenah Solar White cardstock. And so I just want to trim that down so that I'm only using the amount that I need and running this wafer die through my Sizzix Big Kick machine. So I found it fit best laying it horizontal, so I'm just going to cut a strip down out of that and save the rest of the paper for another project. And then I'm just going to cut 2. Everything I'm doing, I'm going to do double because I want to make a card for my mom and a card for my grandmother. Now, on second thought, in hindsight, I kind of wish I had to use mixed media paper here instead of the Neenah Solar White cardstock. And that's more for the colored pencils. I just felt that I probably would have got a better tooth on the paper for laying down the colored pencils. But it still worked fine with the Neenah Solar White. The only thing is when you're cutting wafer dies with cardstock, it's thicker cardstock. Like a mixed media is really thick. It's like a cardstock. So when you're running that through your Sizzix, it's a lot thicker, and so it'll be a little bit tougher to roll through to get that cut, but it does work. You can use the dies to create the same effect. So now I have everything ready. I'm going to get ready to emboss this. So I put down some paper to catch the embossing powder, and I'm just going to prepare the surface with some kitchen flour first so that the embossing powder doesn't stick where I don't want it to. And so I'm going to set my stamps up. And I'm going to start with my critters. I like to stamp my biggest items first and then work out from there and then stamp the smaller ones. I just find it's easier to make everything fit better in the space when you work with the biggest elements first. So I'm going to use the line on my acrylic block as a guide for the little critters to sit on that baseline so that they're matching. So I have my first set of owls and I have that all embossed, and now I'm going to put the embossing powder on. This is my favorite part, is when you can't see the impression and then you put the embossing powder on and then it just comes to life. And it's not quite set yet. I do have to run it under my heat tool, but it's just exciting to see that image appear. So now I'm going to use the grandma sentiment because my grandmother loves owls. They're one of her favorite critters. So this is perfect for her. This card is perfect. So I'm going to put her sentiment and card with the owls, and then the foxes will be for my mom. So I have my sentiment stamped, and I'm just going to do the little exclamation point. It's a separate stamp in the set, so I have to be very careful I don't lose it because I have lost it before. It's super tiny, but I did want to include it. So now I'm going to prepare the card for my mom, so very similar layout, keeping everything the same, but we're going to use the foxes here instead of the owls. And then the sentiment is for my mom. So just doing the embossing, getting everything ready. And then when this is all set, I'm going to take this off camera and run it under my heat tool. I have a heat gun. And so it's more convenient for me to do that away from my desk. So it doesn't take too long. It takes a couple minutes, and then I'll bring it back and it will all be embossed. That gold will be set and be really nice. And the reason why I chose the gold is I wanted to keep everything very warm and very light. Everything is just based off that cardstock color that I have. And so I felt that the gold would be a nice complement instead of just doing the typical black that I usually use. For stamping, I thought that the gold would be a nice warm color and give it a softer look. And because it's a Mother's Day card, I really want it to have that little bit more of elegance and that kind of overall softer feel. So I thought that that worked really well. And so now I'm going to come in with my colored pencils. I'm from Canada, and we actually say pencil crayons. That's how I grew up knowing that they're called. I noticed on the kit, my box, it says colored pencils. And so I'm curious if anyone else uses the term pencil crayons. I don't know. If you do, let me know in the comments below, because I would be curious if anyone outside of Canada uses that term. I don't know. I've never heard anyone to this point. But anyway, so I'm getting my coloring started here. And so the secret to using colored pencils is just working in little circles. When you're coloring, you're not laying down in back and forth lines because you'll create those hard strokes that'll stand out. They don't blend very well. So it's easiest if you work in little tiny circles, rubbing the pencil down like that, and then it creates a nicer blend with the other colors. So when I do this, I like to start with my highlight colors first and thinking about where the highest points of my critter are. And if the sun was coming from a certain direction, the top or the right or the left, just figuring out where those highlights would appear. And then I work out from those highlights, creating the shadows. So I softly build everything up, and the other trick to using colored pencils is really working in layers. So don't go too hard on the first pass. You just want to very lightly lay down your first wash of color, or your first stroke of the color, the pigment, and let it build up over time. If you press really hard when you first start, then you push down all the tooth in the paper, and so there's nothing for it to pull off of your pencil for the next pass, and it's harder to get a solid color. You really have to build it up in layers. So it takes a little bit more time to do this method. But if you do have the time, or you just feel like coloring, it's a really fun way to do a project. And typically I use Copic markers. The thing with Copic markers, I really like how smooth they look. I like the gradients and how even they feel, or how they look. And they're also fast too, but sometimes it's just nice to do some traditional coloring. And I really enjoyed working on these pieces. So the colors that I picked, I tried to keep them all warm tones, and I tried to keep a very limited palette. As I mentioned, I want this card to look very soft and almost monochromatic, but not quite, with just tiny little bits of color, but very warm colors overall and very soft feeling. So all of the colors that I chose are pretty warm. And then just to bring in some pinks in the darkest shadows of those browns, I used a dark plum color. And then in the baby fox and the baby owl, I switched out that plum color for a more of like a magenta pink, but not too bright, just a medium pink. So I'm going to put the list of all the colors that I used in the description below if you want to check those out. All of the POLYCHROMOS colored pencils have names on them. And so I'm not sure about maybe where your local art store is, but for mine, we have a FABER-CASTELL wall. And so you can buy open stock of every color of pencil crayon or colored pencil that they sell, which has been really nice to help me build up my collection, because then I'm able to buy the colors that I feel are missing, that I don't have. And so I do have a lot of browns and creams, and then and pinks as well. Just based on other projects I've done, I've picked up colors as I've needed them. So now I'm just going through with the foxes now. I have my owls all done, so I'm going to use the same process for the foxes. I'm going to start with the highlights first and just blocking those out very softly, and then working out from there and doing the mid-tones next, and then working out those shadows around the edges or in the deepest parts of the shape that I want to put those shadows in. And then you can see I'm bringing in that plum color in the deepest part of the shadows for the dark areas. Now I didn't use any white highlights for this. Typically I will use a white colored pencil, and I like those for the brightest part of the highlight, just to give that big contrast between the base color or the medium tone of the critter and that white highlight. Just looks really sharp. I didn't want to use that on this card because I do want to keep those colors kind of warm and soft. But a recommendation I do have is if you're looking for a white highlight pencil, I found that the Caran d'Ache brand in the Luminescence, I think it's called, or Luminance. Actually, I'll check my pencil and see what it says. It's called Luminance, and their white colored pencil lays down over anything. So I found that if I have like my Prismacolors, for example, and I've been layering them, and then I try to add white after the fact, and I didn't leave space for it, it's hard for me to put the white down as a pure color. But with that Caran d'Ache brand, it's amazing. It will lay down a solid color over top of anything. So I do have a special Caran d'Ache pencil that I keep on the side just for white highlights, for that simple reason that it is just so great for building up on color, and I don't have to worry about not leaving the spot and then coming in after the fact and not being able to add it. Their colored pencils are a little bit more expensive than the FABER-CASTELL brand, but it's definitely worth the price. It's a wonderful brand and quality. So if you are looking to do more colored pencil work, I'd definitely check that out. So now I'm just coloring my little fox. I kind of wish here I'd colored the tail on the bigger fox opposite. I wish I had done the darker part on the mane area and the tip of the tail white. And I realize now in hindsight that was wrong. I just kind of went with it though and kept it. I think my thought on the process during the process was that it was just balancing out the color blocks, so I didn't have all the dark colors touching each other and then the white colors. It was more of a better balance that way, but obviously I think that's wrong. So I colored my little fox the proper way with the little white tail. So I guess maybe my mummy fox is unique because she has a tail that is in reverse. So, but my mom's pretty amazing, so I would say she's one of a kind. So this fox is too. So now I'm just going to color a soft background, something to ground the elements to the scene. I don't want to add too much detail because I do want to keep the warm tones, those pinks and those blush colors, those tans, as the main color. But I'm just going to drop in a really soft green here. And so I'm going to start at the horizon line, and then I'm going to put a little bit of yellow fading out at the bottom just to soften that green so it's not just dropping off. And then I'm coming in with a blue to make the shadow around the critters so they're a bit more grounded to that base element, that green. So once I put the blue down, it's more like a cornflower blue. And so once I have that blue down, I'm going to go over it with my green colored pencil again. And that just makes it look like a cooler green almost. It takes away, it doesn't look like blue when you're done. When you lay the green over top, it just kind of blends together and gives more of a darker green, a richer green. So it makes a nice shadow color, and it makes it kind of interesting because it's not just a black or a gray or a darker green. It creates that interest with that blue undertone. So I'm doing the same on my owl card, the exact same process, keeping these very similar. And so doing this grounding element isn't too complicated. There's nothing really involved art-wise here, but it really grounds the scene and kind of adds a little more dimension and interest to the overall stamping, which is really nice. So I have these colored up. They're looking really good. So now I'm ready to put the cards together. And again, I'm keeping this very simple. I'm going to put some foam tape on the back of my art base here. And so I'm just putting one layer, and I'm making sure I do put a piece of foam tape in the middle just to support the card and around the edges. I'm going to use my X-Acto knife to hold this out away from my hands so that I can see equally on every side and try to center it as best as possible. And so I have that one done. I'm going to do the other one, just throwing on some more tape randomly. I didn't have any rhyme or reason to putting the tape on. It just kind of ended up all scattered, but it worked. And so just putting this one on the exact same way, keeping my hands out of the way so I can see center, and then just pushing it down into place. And with this card, I really like that that base is made out of that pink cardstock, so you open it up and you still see that pink. It's not just white on the inside, which is really nice. So I really like the way these came out, and I had so much fun coloring them. It was so nice to work with my colored pencils again. I haven't used them in so long. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you're notified the next time I post more videos. And happy Mother's Day! Thanks so much for watching.